TV umpire to director, we have a review. Can you rock and roll it for me, please?
Welcome to another episode of Rock and Roll It, a podcast where three millennials try to stay hip and try to stay with it in an ever changing world that is veering closer towards post truth, post humanism, and post logic. My 6-year-old came home from school the other day and told me all the kids in her class were saying 6-7, which is apparently some meaningless Gen Alpha term. I told her that they should be talking about 2-5 because that is India's record in home tests in their last 7 home tests. They've been blanked against by South Africa. And or maybe they should be talking about 6-8, right? Said
Yes, it's Marco Jensen's height, which is one of the key reasons why India find themselves in this predicament in
2-5
this situation. Yeah.
yeah, we're showing off a bit of our Gen Alpha knowledge there, and at least knowing what some of the source of 6-7 is. I don't even know what it means fully. But let me ask, so the Indian coach has said that this is just a transition period and so it should be understood. But it's two series against top six sides where India has been whitewashed at home. We haven't seen anything like this since the early 1980s. You have to go even further back to when you look at the number of tests India has lost in the last 2 years, which I think is 11 or 12 tests, right, that they've lost in the last 2 years, or 10 within the last year itself. So we're talking about a historic low for India. I'll start by asking you, KK, is this the lowest M for Indian Test cricket since you've been covering Test cricket?
No. I mean, the lowest ebb was certainly 2011-12 when the 4-0 in England, 4-0 in Australia, and 2-1 loss to England at home happened. Also because you look at this group of players and you look at the other results they've had also. They won in Perth, they won 2 tests in England. Pretty much all the tests at home that they've lost also, they could have won given a few factors going this way and that. So while it is a worrying phase, and while I, have some issues with the way the teams have been assembled, selected, and all of that, this is a good team. Whereas 2011-12, you were wondering where are the players going to come, especially the bowlers, to change those fortunes around. And yeah, it looked like a much harder way back. Although it happened very quickly, starting with 2013 Australia at home. Although it happened quite quickly, at that point where England beat India at home, you were wondering how India are going to turn it around at all. I don't quite feel that same sense of, say, despair or, uh, you know, hopelessness right now. So I think there are issues, but I don't think they're as bad as they were in that previous phase. Yeah, in 2011, 2012, you never knew where the 20 wickets are going to come from. Whereas here you have a bowling attack that should take 20 wickets almost everywhere. Sometimes it might be at a little extra cost than desired, but you have an attack which should be doing well. So that way it is not that big a crisis. But the difference is in 2011, 2012, you had a batting group that had done well for 2-3 years, at least 2-3 years in first class cricket, in this format of cricket, averaging well above 50 in first class cricket against good opposition, who are ready to take over the batting transition. I think bowling transition right now might, on paper, I'm saying, look easier, but batting transition is a little bit more difficult right now because I have a suspicion that over the last 10 years or so of IPL and T20 cricket, the best batting talent from certain ages, let's say a cricketer starts a pool of cricketers, potential India level, international level cricketers starts at the age of 10. So at the age of 10, now the best talent is giving more of their focus to hitting rather than trying to play long innings, which could have an impact on the kind of batting depth India has in first class cricket right now. I mean, if people have followed our podcast, we have been talking about how 3 people either in the squad or just next off the rank are not averaging 50 in first class cricket. But then I went further and tried to look at, hey, who can be better? Who can replace them? And I could come up with those same old names. Karun Nair, Hanuma Vihari,
Sarfaraz Khan is one exception for whom I think they have. I'm not saying it, I know it, but my suspicion is that they have decided that he is not a great player of high pace. So, what's the point of, just playing him in India and then sending somebody else when it's going to be high pace? So, batting is a little bit of a stretch, a little bit of a challenge right now. In the openers are still okay, but in the middle order, there are two slots that are still not filled.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the openers as well because on the evidence of this test, I don't know. There are questions about the openers as well that a lot of people are having. But let's talk about this test to start with because, okay, some of the reasons that we had for India's previous losses, whether they were the last two tests, especially in New Zealand and the first test against South Africa, were the pitches. You can't use that excuse in this test because it was a perfect pitch. It lasted till day 5. South Africa, even in the second innings, forget about the first innings, you might put that down to the advantage of winning the toss. But even in the second innings, they batted more than 70 overs and didn't look in that much trouble, to be honest. It didn't look like they were going to get out at any stage. They ended up declaring. So, how do we then explain this loss? And also, after seeing this loss, do we now have to recalculate some of the things we said previously, where we were putting a lot of the emphasis on tactics, the the pitches that were being rolled out? Well, now we've seen the kind of pitch that frankly we were all asking for. And India has still not just lost, but actually been hammered by an even wider margin. Do you now see some of the justification for the previous pitches? And does this make you more concerned that India have actually lost on what was a perfect test match pitch?
So, sorry, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, either way. Yeah, why not? So, I think, yes, in a way, their fear of the toss making a huge impact, you could see why they feared it. But more than that, I think our contention all along has been that India's spinners and their fast bowlers on normal Indian pitches would outbowl visiting attacks. Uh, you know, because they had more skill in Indian conditions, more knowledge, uh, more depth. So, they could bowl for a longer period of time with that same intensity, etc. The trouble is when you run into an attack which is as good or, with at least one bowler, two bowlers here who could get a lot more out of the conditions than India's bowlers were able to. Plus, yes, the toss also did make quite a difference. It makes a difference on all kinds of pitches. But yeah, it made a big difference here. If I don't know if India would have won necessarily if they had batted first here because of the way Simon Harmer especially was bowling and because of the way Marco Jansen bowled and the disconcerting bounce that he got. But I do think they would have competed much better and it would have been a closer test for sure. Both with bat and ball, they would have competed better. All that put together, yeah, I think our general contention, I still believe that, against most teams, India should play on traditional Indian pitches, both for the fact of being more competitive or like making their opponents have to like work that much harder and expose their weaknesses, which in a way you could have done here also if you think about it. If India had won the toss, they had only three strike bowlers playing. They picked an 11 that was possibly had one eye on like the bad light and the potential of, okay, we bat so long so that if we get to a situation where we have to just draw the game and win 1-0, we can do that as well. I'm not saying that was necessarily the thinking, but it could have been. So, given that they selected that kind of 11, if India had won the toss, if their five bowlers versus South Africa's three really good bowlers plus like, sort of support bowlers, you could still see our logic holding good. It's just that those, especially two of those bowlers, had incredible test matches, incredible series. And India, I think there's a few weaknesses that were exposed in India's attack because of this game, which we kind of assumed weren't there. Uh, we thought even on a good Indian pitch, these spinners, for example, would find ways to take wickets. Now we're beginning to see that there could be a gap between them and the best spinners in the world, of whom Simon Harmer definitely is one. He was doing much more in the air than the Indian spinners, getting a lot more dip, beating batters for length, and getting a lot more bounce out of a red soil surface, which is another factor, I think. I think for India's bowlers, they like pitches where you can keep the stumps in play a lot, whether it's their fast bowlers or their spinners. This was a pitch where high bounce bowlers really came through. Both Jansen and Harmer really feasted on the bounce that they were getting. And India's bowlers aren't quite as good. We see this when they go outside Asia. We see this especially when they go to South Africa, and South Africa's height advantage really plays a part. And that somehow on an Indian pitch, it was a bouncy sort of red soil pitch. That deficiency in the attack also came through.
But I still don't think that the toss played that big a part, honestly. You just look at how India did after losing the toss. They won 246 for 6. I think it is advantage India. I would like to make a mention of Rishabh Pant's captaincy here, because he has also come under a lot of fire. In the dying moments of the day, he executed a pretty sneaky, clever move. Because if you have been playing with India or watching India over the last 10 years, India never take the new ball as soon as it becomes available. Because they don't want to risk tired bowlers bowling with a new ball which will travel for runs. They usually take it around the 85th over so that they bowl about maximum 5 overs before stumps, and then they come back fresh on the next morning. Here, seeing that the light could drop any moment, he snuck in the new ball and got that extra wicket with just 1 over that was possible of Mohammad Siraj. So anyway, that was just a segue because Pant is under a lot of fire for captaincy. This is also one good thing that he did as a captain. Now, 246 for 6 advantage India, I say, after day one on a good batting track. And that came through. Maybe India individually did not have the best bowler in the side, but that came through because of the depth in India's bowling department, where they did not, when they were not getting wickets, they did not let runs flow. And when I think Temba, Bavuma and Fian Mulder tried to break free, they felt like they might not have got out, but they're still not ahead of the game. And if they get out anytime, it could be a problem. And then they tried to push the pace, and both of them got out. So India's bowling might not have been spectacular, but it was good enough for losing the toss on day one. On day two, again, the whole first session, India did not get a wicket, but India did not let them score runs. When they lost the 7th wicket after batting more than a session, they were 334 for 7. And I would still say, as a home team, you would still take it, because then if you can bowl them out for under 400, we have seen many times India have come back from 350, 380, conceding 380, 350 and winning the matches. And but here comes somebody who just made a complete mockery of the conditions and the bowling. Until then, nobody had been able to score at will. Here comes the number 9 who has this reach, who messes around with every bowler, and he slog sweeps, and I've never seen such a tall batter waltzing down to Kuldeep Yadav and lofting him for a 6 over long on. He does all that. It was a crazy innings. It was really, really high quality hitting, where he kind of negated the conditions, India's bowling depth, and he turned it into 489, which is bigger than any total that a team has scored in the first innings in India and lost. Now India were required to bat out of their skins rather than just get level or 100, 200 lead, which they could if they had bowled South Africa out for under 400. The scorecard pressure obviously plays a role. Now 489, India get a good start. India have one eye on the time, because you're losing 10 overs every day. So I think Yashasvi Jaiswal was a little conscious of that and is trying to score quickly. And then 2 balls out of nowhere turn so much, and I think India panicked a little. That could be lack of experience, where they thought, hey, the pitch is going now we better play our shots, which I thought was an experience mistake that they made, and that collapse ensued. And of course, Marco Jansen again getting bounced from such a short of a length. He showed a graphic where Jansen can get the ball to your head height by bowling a meter fuller than Siraj. That's 3 feet. I mean, that's a big difference. such steep bounce can get batters out if there is good bounce in the pitch, which this one had, as you said. So I really don't think it was a toss at that caused this, but a combination of many things, and of course, two all-time great performances by Marco Jansen and Simon Harmer, which you rarely come up against, or you don't let them happen. Sometimes here it happened, and there is an inexperienced batting lineup which lost 6 wickets. I don't. If there was a 5-test series, I don't think India would have lost those 7 wickets in that collapse. India would have tried to bat more normally because it was the last test and you had to win it. There was a little bit of indecision and panic and just shortness of time that clouded the decision making, which you not necessarily in the shots that they got out to, but just the decision making at that moment. And after that, there was a lot of catching up to do, which of course, Dustin, you said that in the third innings it didn't look like India could get wickets, but that happens once you're so far behind. The bowling does tend to lose intensity and that sting. As you saw, Bumrah and Siraj bowled only one spell and then they were just given a break because you don't want to be cruel on them. So, no, generally, saying this test was more a case of just coming up against such two players who were just at their all-time best, and one of them has physical attributes which you very rarely come across. There was Marco Jansen, even when he was fielding, he was doing things that only Marco can do. Those two catches, one for the first one to get Jaiswal, I don't know how many other players would have taken that catch. Even if they would have, it would have taken a spectacular dive forward. And that last catch was it's one of the all-time great catches, which will not get discussed that much because it was the last. If I mean, Ben Stokes has been told you can't do that, Ben, for doing things pedestrian compared to what Jansen did in this test match. Simon Harmer also comes with physical attributes. So they were talking, I think Dale Steyn was talking, his boot size is size 15 and his fingers are proportionately that long, which allows him such good control and which allows him to impart so much revs on the ball. So this test, you just have to concede that you got Jansen and hammered. Even if you were like batting, even if India had batted better, they would still have conceded about 100-run lead there, and India would still have lost, maybe not by this big a margin. And it happens once in a while. You just come up against a team that is performing so well, and that should not cancel the theory that India should play on good wickets, which gives them the best chance to win in India.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not doubting that India should play more on these kind of wickets also because it's just better for Test cricket. But you say that sometimes you come across a side that is just as good. But the fact is for India, 0-5 now against top teams when they're playing at home. Yes, pitches have played a role, but I do think we need to look a little deeper into India's batters' techniques because at this point, you're looking at that batting lineup and you're actually wondering, okay, who among these guys has the technique to play really good test match bowling? And I'll include the openers in this because ultimately we've seen one of them get out on the same shot again and again, Yashasvi Jaiswal. Obviously an incredibly talented player, but at this point you've got to start asking, is there the temperament there if you're going to keep getting out in the same way repeatedly? And even with KL Rahul, KL Rahul, often we say, oh, he got a good ball. But I've seen him at least 3 times now since the England series get out, lunging forward to spinners. And the reality is that he doesn't get to the pitch of the ball. There is maybe a technique issue there. And then you look further down the line, I agree that Marco Jansen bowled an exceptional spell, but you've got Dhruv Jurel hooking from outside off stump, which is not perhaps the shot he should have played. Even if you look at Nitish Kumar Reddy's dismissal, you might call that a brilliant ball, but I think a lot of, even our in-house experts in the studio were saying that that's the kind of ball you have to expect in test match cricket. You should be able to play it. Okay, maybe Jadeja got a little unlucky. It's a very, uncommon thing to get hit on the body and then the bat. But is there a fundamental lack of technique in some of India's batters? And is there more to the theory that we have, to a certain extent, kind of, rubbished by calling it an uncle opinion that this generation of batters, their techniques are not as good because of T20 cricket. But did this test show us that, no, there is actually a lot more to that theory? Maybe it wasn't, maybe you couldn't blame them completely on the square turners that they had played on before. But this test really did show, even against a very good bowling lineup, that there are some fundamental issues in technique for a lot of India's batters, not just some of the inexperienced ones. Would you agree with that, Sid?
So I would like to ask a counter question to this. What do we think of Temple Boomer's technique? He's averaging 50 as a captain or 56 as a captain. He got out caught at mid off trying to hit Jadeja. He got out caught at backward short leg trying to defend, lunging forward, as we say about KL Rahul. Same Jaiswal and Rahul scored 500 runs in England, which was okay, flatter pitches, but it was a good attack. Same KL Rahul has scored unbelievable hundreds in South Africa. Uh, the, I, we should not. There's a when India lose, or when somebody loses, there is a temptation to poke holes in their technical setups based on just the dismissals. We will come to. I will just come to Jurel and Reddy in a moment. I really don't feel there is a problem with Jaiswal and Rahul. Jaiswal cut shot is the strength of his. If he shells it, then where does he score runs? You cannot, because the purpose of scoring batting is scoring runs. And I've been looking at this cut shot like even before anybody started. I've been talking about it since England, but he has to play the cut shot. It's not like he does not need to play the cut shot, and he averages 41 with the cut shot against fast bowlers, which is slightly low because cut shots should be played to bad balls and they should not be. They should be averaging 100 on the cut shot or something. So there might be a small issue. He will go back and work on it, but it's not like the cut shot. Anybody is setting him up for the cut shot. It is. It's not like a good length ball outside off stump that is the problem. This is one of the freak things which, if maybe later, he in a couple of tests he might show a little restraint and then play once he's in. Also, in this series, Marco Jansen's extra bounce caused him problem on that cut shot. Jaiswal and Rahul, I will not have an issue with. Coming to the newer batters, and the newer batters that India have tried are Sai Sudarshan, Washington Sundar, Dhruv Jurel, and Nitish Kumar Reddy. I think as we have discussed in this space previously, Nitish Kumar Reddy should not be playing Test cricket or any international cricket right now. They should have kept him in Ranji, let him build his workload, let him know how you build up to wickets, maybe open the bowling, maybe bowl first change, let him work out, what are the flows of the game at different times of the match. Let him build a season of first class cricket. If you're serious about looking at him as a test all-rounder when you go to New Zealand next, he should not have been with the Indian team right now. You can't have both. You want to develop him, he will not develop in the nets. Especially a bowler will not develop in the nets. And his batting, I think the Melbourne century has done him more harm than good, because of that he tends to get treated like a batter. He's not. He has to, he needs a couple of seasons of first class, or at least one full season of first class cricket before he comes back as a seam bowling all-rounder who can be put in at 6 or 7. Jurel, I think they might have played him 1 or 2 spots too high based on his hundreds in South Africa, which kind of showed in, not maybe in his technique, but in his experience and his tactics. Like that shot came out because he was on nothing for 11 balls, and he saw the length and he said, okay, I will play that shot. And in the second innings also, Abhiram Mukund made that point which is quite basic for these first class cricketers. When the off spinner is turning the ball big, you stand on off stump, not on middle stump, because you want to cover the line, and that's what he did not do. So tactics was the bigger problem. Tactics and experience was the bigger problem with Jurel, which he should not have been playing at 4. That should not be happening. And it was again unfortunate that Gill got injured and he came in at 4, and they did not have Sarfaraz in the squad. Sudarshan, I am still not sure about. He's got his chances, and I will stick my neck out and say that Washington Sundar looks like a better batter than Sai Sudarshan, just as a batter. So maybe Washington Sundar should be tried just as a batter at 5 or 6 once Gill is back, or even at 3 and given him a long run. But And these guys will, if there are issues, the more first class cricket they play, the better they will get. It's just sitting with the squad does them no good. I mean, back then, Rahane, Rahul, Rahane, Pujara, when 2012, when there was crisis and India had a set of batters ready, except for Kohli and Rohit Sharma, everybody else was scoring runs in first class cricket. And Kohli had shown that he's that one kind of extreme talent whose ODI runs were good enough to get him into the test side also. But most of them were like playing first class cricket, scoring first class runs, and that is somehow not coming through. The Indian first class cricket has not been throwing any ready-made talent right now in batting, which could be more of a concern than the technique of these guys who are already there.
And I'll just add to those points a little bit, which is you mentioned that point Abhinav Mokun made about Jurel not taking an off-stump guard. Now, even really experienced players take a while to like change that sometimes. Like Pujara was telling us in that episode we did with him, that Bangalore Test second innings, it took Anil Kumble telling him and then him trying it out in the nets. Imagine he had already been an international cricketer like 7 years, almost 6.5 years by then. So sometimes that's the case that, you may not as yet think, this is what I need to do. The other thing, or you might be like, this is my method, and each method comes with trade-offs, right? And that even until that point, like except for the balls like really turning out of the rough, it felt like kind of pitch where you could play against the turn, against the off spinner, and maybe pick up some runs there through the offside. So maybe that is the trade-off that Jurel was willing to make, and then he got done on the outside edge, which, what do you do? So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with the techniques. If India had won, they would have had the same techniques and the same issues. And if South Africa had lost, they would have had the same techniques. And there is no watertight technique. I mean, like Gambhir said, and that the first three were with Kohli, Rohit Sharma in the team, and the next two are with Jurel and Sai Sudarshan. I mean, Sai Sudarshan played one of the games, but yeah, with these younger guys in the team. So, you can't really like say 5-0 and say it's all down to, not all down to, I know you're not saying that, but that, technique, batting technique is an issue that runs right through it. I will say that, like Monga said, it's a tactical thing, and it's also a thing that, see, after the match, when Gambhir was asked, okay, what do we need to do now? And he said, we need to prioritize test cricket. We need to, prioritize red ball cricket, basically, not look at white ball records. And none of these players have been selected in the team based on their white ball records, because the young guys in the team have,
Sai Sudarshan.
except for Sai Sudarshan, who is probably like, a very red ball kind of player in a way. And they've also been selected based on like India A records. But the point I was trying to make is not so much that they've not been selected based on white ball, but the fact that when you're saying all this, but you don't seem to like, sort of have this idea that a player needs to show it over a period of time in Ranji Trophy, in domestic cricket, before getting into the team, right? I can see all these players have, they don't look out of place in test cricket. I will say that they look like, okay, somebody has seen them, seen that, okay, they have the game to survive against really good bowling and score runs also. But do they have that know-how? Do they have that experience of seeing out like tough periods and then coming out with a big 100 in a first class game again and again in different conditions, different parts of India, having that sort of stamina mentally and physically to bat for that period of time and come out with like really big hundreds, and at the end of the season they have 800, 900 runs, right? You want players like that in the team, especially like once Gill got injured, India ended up, proving all their critics right, even though their critics weren't necessarily right when saying that, these guys are all rounders, they're not specialists, they shouldn't be playing. with the exception of Nitish Kumar Reddy, they're all like good enough to bat in the top 6 in India in Test cricket, just in terms of their game. But whether in terms of like knowing what you want from a number 3 and a number 4, especially, is like guys who will, once they are in, they'll score hundreds, especially in good batting conditions. You can't say that about the players that that are there right now, and for which, yeah, I'll just say that like that, uh, the kind of basis through which India seem to be selecting players, and I'll give them the benefit of doubt because it's a transition that you have to pick young players, and also the fact that even when Kohli, Rohit, even when Pujara was still playing, there wasn't a batter other than Sarfaraz who was tearing it down in Ranji trophies, demanding that, hey, you need to pick me now. When Sachin
Shreyas Iyer had a crazy first class record, and it's a big loss to Indian cricket that he cannot play Test cricket.
yeah, it's very true. Yeah, but yeah, when say Sachin, Rahul Dravid, Lakshman were still playing, people were like, hey, when are Kohli and Rohit going to get their chance? When Pujara had played one game and people were like, look, there's such a good talent, he's ready. And he's not such a body of work in first class cricket. Rahane, people had been talking about since like his first class debut in 2006-7. So these were players who were there and waiting and knocking on the door very loudly. You don't really see that volume of like players with those kinds of records demanding that they should get picked, which is why you're going back to a Karun Nair at 33, which is why you're going to someone as untested with as mediocre a record as Sai Sudarshan, which is why you're playing Jurel as a specialist, even though, I think he's got the game to play Test cricket for a really long time, even as a specialist. Probably at this point at 5 or 6, not at 4. I think he's got the game, but I can't think of a time in Indian cricket where, he would play ahead of like other, like, he'd be almost like if you wanted to pick just one out of Jurel, Sai Sudarshan, and Padikkal in this team, there's one batting slot and you had to pick one of these. You would pick Jurel, I think. I would pick him. So that says a lot about the batting reserves that India have in red ball cricket right now. And that's like...
Sorry, I was just saying that Hanuma Vihari's name keeps coming back. If you're looking at the last 10 years best first class players, we have the same guys whom they discarded and whose age also was not on their side, like Karun and Hanuma. Even Pujara got.
But the point is that these players do exist. There's also Abhimanyu Easwaran, who has got so many runs, not been given a chance. Maybe, okay, you feel like
the issue with Abhimanyu Easwaran, and also whenever he's played India A, like since 2023, I think he averages 20 or something in India A matches.
A lot of those matches are away from home, and you know that he is somebody who can handle Indian conditions because this is where he's got a lot of runs. Yes, he's an opener, but you are batting Sai Sudarshan at number 3. You could easily bat Abhimanyu Easwaran at number 3. You have Sarfaraz Khan. You have even guys like Karun Nair and Hanuma Vihari. And my point would be that saying that it's a transition, so you need to pick young players, is not addressing how critical the situation is. You are getting hammered at home by teams that you should not be getting thrashed by. And surely the impetus right now should be to stop the rot, to say, okay, for the second test at least, let's play a Sarfaraz, let's play a Karun Nair. Doesn't matter if they don't make it to the next tour, whenever it is. But the most important thing is to win these home tests. I mean, now the side is going to be so deflated. I think the interest level of Indian cricket fans, I know you guys are trying to present a more sort of optimistic picture, but honestly, the general sentiment right now is that Indian Test cricket is done for. I mean, this is humiliating to lose 0-3 to New Zealand, 0-2 to South Africa. It's something that's not happened in our lifetimes. That's where, I mean, we disagree with you guys on 2011-12 in that at least past Indian sides had been whitewashed away from home. But we've not seen an Indian side get thrashed like this at home. And surely the selector should be thinking the priority needs to be to win the series. It's okay if you play 33-year-olds there. If they have the runs, if they know how to play in tough conditions, and as you said, if they've got the stamina and the temperament to score hundreds, 150s, which Sarfaraz, for example, has shown even at the test level, Why are these guys not playing, and instead you're playing guys who we are all admitting maybe don't have that mental stamina to play the long innings?
Mm,
Or you guys still want to be optimistic and say this is the right route? Huh?
when is the guarantee that Vihari and Nair would have India won India the series? They've got their chances. Neither of them. Okay, Nair has won triple hundred, but outside that, I'm not saying he would not have, but I'm saying where's the guarantee? And let's give selectors the benefit of the doubt that they perhaps know these finer either or differences more than maybe better than us.
I'll just say one. I mean, broadly, yes, I agree with that. I'll just say that once Gill got that neck sprain, once he faced 3 balls and he was out of the Calcutta test, then itself they should have called up a right hand batter as cover. Right?
Definitely,
Then-
Sarfaraz Khan.
Yeah, probably Sarfraz Khan. If
I
that,
wouldn't have
if
gone
he's-
the Karun Nair Hanuma Vihari route. I would have gone.
for whatever reason, Sarfraz is not even playing India A. Maybe they are good reasons that the selectors have. I don't see any, but whatever. Let's say okay, respect that thing. Maybe they have a point. Pick another right-hand specialist batter in the squad, so that you're not going. There was a decent gap between Gill getting that sprain and India, and that second test starting in Guwahati. They didn't, they were either so desperate that Gill plays. Even if you're desperate, there's no like law saying that you can't have another guy just in the squad as cover, right?
Yeah,
Why not bring
definitely. I
someone
mean,
in? Why are you
India
getting into a
just-
situation where you're picking Nitish Kumar Reddy simply because he's a right-hand batter? You're not picking him because he's an all-rounder. You're not picking him for the overs he's going to bowl. You're not picking him because he's a better batter than Devdutt Padikkal. You're picking him purely because he's a right-hand batter. If you just want a right-hand batter, pick the best possible right-hand batter you can pick from
Absolutely.
whichever.
And
Like
if you want a batter, I don't care right left. You pick your best batter, which was DDP here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Let's switch over a bit. We've talked a lot about India's batting. We haven't even brought up that Rishabh Pant shots on the first things that drew ire from a lot of people. I won't ask you because I think I know what your opinion will be on it, which is that that's the way he plays and it's been successful for him in the past. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
Not really. That might not be the unanimous opinion here. Because there are times when you do that, times when you don't do that. Here, I think he also was a little muddled. His decision making was a little muddled around the scoring rate also. So
Do you really think that? I mean, I know you mentioned this before, but do you really think India, as early as the morning session on day 3, were thinking about the pace of scoring runs? I would have thought that the smarter tactics would be to at least play through 2.5 sessions and only maybe towards the end of day 3 start thinking about scoring rate and trying to win. I would have thought that the memo would have been just bat normally for the first 2 sessions. But do you think that they were? Because my other theory on Pant is that he does things like that to get his own feet moving. It's a little like how sometimes before a run you need to do a squat so that you're going to do okay on your run. I feel like Pant maybe does that just to get his own feet moving so he feels more confident than in his defense. But I mean, it's an interesting.
the other reason why he does it is now look at the second inning. Simon Harman knew this guy has been criticized by everyone for that shot. He is not going to play shots now. And he bowled his slowest balls of the match, 2 of them in a row to Pant. And Pant was a sitting duck when defending them. The way he was defending, he's probably not that sure of his defense as he is of his attack. He was not. There was no way he could survive that if he was just stretching forward and defending those balls that he did, and eventually that ball got him. So Pant has his way of playing. He tries to his way of his tactic seems to be to not let the bowler settle, to try to beat them off their rhythm. But as Karthik wrote this piece, sometimes you choose your bowlers. You maybe don't do that to Jansen. Maybe you do that to Anderson. You do that to Stokes. You don't do that to Archer and Jansen, especially Jansen, who can get steep bounce. So
I think
I'm sure he will look back and I'm sure they are hurting more than us. to be saying humiliate, to use the word humiliation. How am I humiliated, man? They lost. It's okay. I don't feel I have a bigger, higher sense of self-worth than getting humiliated by India. India losing test matches. India, which is run by a India, which is run by a private body, BCCI. If they lose matches, I'm not humiliated.
Okay, I wanted to bring this point
And
up.
also, like on that, sorry, just on that Rishabh Pant's point, like we observed a pattern during that England tour where he was doing this in almost every innings where either first or second ball, he's usually facing a fast bowler, he's charging out, right? Maybe he doesn't play such a wild, but the wildness of this log is also because he kind of like, it wouldn't
Depends on
look
the
that
length.
wild if, yeah, it's the length and like, you just lose your shape and it ends up looking like a way worse shot than it. I'm not saying it was a good shot in any way. I'm just saying it looks even worse because of the fact that he just, chose the completely wrong ball for it and got completely twisted out of shape. But he does that a lot. The thing I feel sometimes is that he he did this against Rabada in 2021-22 when India went to South Africa. Similar thing, similar dismissal. And at that point, he was struggling with his right arm over line, right? For a while. India had gone to England before that. That line had been getting him out constantly. And after that Brisbane innings, between Brisbane and this South Africa tour, he was averaging like less than 20 or something like that. So it, to me, it felt then that it came out of a place of insecurity rather than like overconfidence. Because sometimes you look at a shot like that and you think, how the hell does he think he's going to get away with it? I don't think that's where it came from. It came from a place of, I don't know how I'm going to survive here. And a sense of panic comes in. And look, I can't get into Pant's head and I've not spoken to him about it. But this is the sense I get sometimes. And I got this sense from in Calcutta as well, where I've never seen him look so uncertain against a bowler as he has looked against Harmer through this series. Whether it's an off spinner, whether it's any kind of bowler, usually he has a plan when he's batting well. Whether he's defending, whether he's attacking, it's like he backs that plan. Either it comes out off or he gets out. But he didn't look like he had one in Calcutta in that second innings. Even in the first innings, he was okay against Maharaj. He was hitting him for sixes and all. Even in this match, he looked okay against Maharaj and, whichever other non-Jansen, non-Harmer bowlers he faced. I don't think he felt particularly confident of surviving or scoring runs when those two were bowling, probably. And maybe with Jansen, I think all of India, like from the end of day two, when I think Jansen got a couple to climb like that, even at Rahul, and on the third morning as well. I think from that point, they were very wary of that weird bounce, and Pant probably thought, let me try and shift that length somehow. I don't know if he picked the right moment for it. I don't think he did. But that might have been the thinking, plus this thing of like, I don't know, maybe he just wasn't feeling his usual confident, I can get on top of the bowler's self.
Yeah, okay, let's.
Pop Everett, no, while on pop psychology, I feel he just lets his intrusive thoughts win every once in a while. And
I mean, we've seen evidence of that when he was like telling himself, wicket ke piche must khel, like play straight and stuff. Right? Yeah.
playing that shirt.
Yeah.
So he's like he there's an imp inside him which he kind of struggles to keep inside.
Okay, let's switch over to India's bowling and we'll also discuss Pant's captaincy in this, although, of course, he's not India's long-term captain, so maybe we don't need to spend that much time on it. But India's bowling, the reality is, yes, day one, you would say that they showed that they can take wickets on a flat track. But then to concede 200 runs for the last four, I mean, way more, in fact, than 200 runs for the last four wickets on day two, it just seemed like, yes, India bowled pretty well in that morning session. They kept things tight. But what I will say is on Pant's captaincy, I found again, and I don't know whether this was also a request from the bowler, but Bumrah was bowled in very short spells on that second morning. I think his first spell was 3 overs, and then he bowled another spell of just 2 overs. I think on that second morning. Siraj, of course, bowled a longer spell, but pretty quickly Pant went to the two finger spinners who looked least likely to take wickets. But even you would say that the Seamers, Kuldeep Yadav, considering what South Africa did after that, we also need to look at India's bowling and say, okay, on paper, we all thought that this is a bowling attack that at least in home conditions should be able to take 20 wickets, no problem, whatever the pitch is. Do we need to reconsider that a little bit after this test match? In particular, the finger spinners, I would say. KK, you can answer.
Yeah, the finger spinners. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's just them. It is, I mean, especially them. I think it comes from since 2021, except for the odd series now and then that India have been playing more or less on like sharp turning tracks right through, and that you know puts you in this rhythm of like bowling in that way constantly, which is for the finger spinners bowling flat, fast, attacking the stumps, and exploiting natural variation, which is the way to bowl on those tracks. So you can't fault them for it. Even things like Jadeja going round the wicket a lot to left-hand batters, or Ashwin used to go round the wicket a lot to right-hand batters, which you do when there's a lot of turn. So you pitch within the stumps and finish within the stumps, so you increase your chance of getting LBWs, which is a great tactic for that. Jadeja was doing that even on this Guwahati pitch a lot against the left-hand batters, where you might think, why don't you bowl outside off stump, bring the outside edge also into play, you're getting a bit of bounce. So it's affected their styles of bowling quite a bit. And once you get into that kind of rhythm, it's very hard in the middle of a match. And it's a successful method that works for them most of the time in India. So it's very hard, A, to switch, and B, to tell yourself to switch, because part of you is like, this is who I am, this is what's made me successful. And they also aren't the kind of versatile bowler that, say, Ashwin was in his prime. So all of that contributes to bowling in this way, which again comes back to our larger point that, playing on ranked turners is not good for even the long-term development of your own players. And the other thing I think is what that does is it gets you used to bowling in very short batting innings. If the team lasts 90 overs, it's a rare thing, right? So then when you're bowling like third session of day 2 and the team is still batting, the team batting first, it can get hard if you're not used to that anymore. It's not that they play other first class cricket, they don't get the time. These are like all format players. So where are they getting that volume of overs in to be able to do that? Especially a guy like Kuldeep Yadav, I feel. And as much as we all love him, the three of us, and as well as he bowled on day 1, maybe I think Monga, I think you did criticize him in your live reports and stuff for the fact that he wasn't giving Kuldeep long spells, right? I think the longest spell he bowled was 5 overs. And if you want
None of India's spinners was getting long spells, which was an issue because
which is an
want to
issue.
bowl they want to bowl 10 overs, 15 overs, which Hammer
Yeah.
was given. Like for a long time, Temba did not feel obligated to bowl Muthusamy.
Yeah, correct.
He just assumed I have 2 spinners.
Correct. So which
He bowled
happened,
Markram.
which was happening a lot with India in 2023 against Australia,
Yeah.
where they were putting
Jayant
Akshar
Yadav
Patel in every game,
Even
but he
before
barely
that-
bowled,
Even before that, Jayant Yadav used to be there in the side but hardly bowl.
hardly bowled. So when you have two spinners who are like demanding the ball, pretty much like either through their own past performances or actually on the field saying, I don't care if it's two right-handers bowling. You can't imagine Ashwin not bowling for a long time just because two right-handers are there, right? Whereas with Washington, you see it very often. And so, I mean, yeah, either through stature or the captain not quite believing in their skill yet, or the bowler himself not demanding the ball. Through all these reasons, that also happens. But where I was going with that Kuldeep point is that even in Delhi, where West Indies followed on and he was player of the match, he got 8 wickets and he was the one guy who looked like he had the tools to get wickets on that pitch. But I think after his initial first innings thing, somehow it felt like a little bit of bite went, reduced in his bowling. A little bit of his length control also slightly, not massively. And he's a wrist spinner, so you've got to give him that leeway. Little bit of his length control also, went down. Again, it's like 2 test matches I'm talking about, so I'm not making some very conclusive point here. I'm not very convinced about my own argument. But maybe, like, if you're not playing enough of test matches on pitches where you have to bowl long spells, where you have to bowl for a long time to bowl teams out, maybe you're not used to it and you end up, bowling either the wrong sort of styles for that kind of pitch because you haven't developed the other ways of bowling, or you end up kind of losing steam because physically you're not used to that workload. And I think all of that is a concern for India. And the other thing I want to touch upon with regards to the same thing is that because India have been playing on these square turners day in and day out, they keep picking players for those conditions, right? What do you want in those conditions? Bowlers who can bowl quick and accurately threaten the stumps all the time, and bat so that on bowling friendly pitches you have long batting, which in good times it becomes a cheat code for India, right? So you pick these kinds of players. You always have Akshar Patel in your squad, apart from Jadeja and Washington, and there are good reasons for it if you're playing on those kinds of pitches. But are you also, like, at the same time developing or like keeping an eye on who's the spinner who you want to pick if you're, if you know that you're going to play a series on flat pitches? Who's that guy with, subtle changes in pace and trajectory? Who's that guy who can bowl long spells and set a batter up, and also, like, not just get guys out bowled in LBW, but say caught at slip, caught at bat pad. So these are things that I think have kind of gone missing from Indian spin bowling at test level. I can't say they've gone missing from Indian spin bowling at large, but they're not the things that are being prioritized. And so all of these also came. All of these things also, came together in this match, I feel.
Sid, before you start, I just one sec. I want to because let's talk about two bowlers in specific. I think KK has talked a little bit about Kuldeep and the overall bowling, but let's talk about specifically two of the biggest names, Jadeja and Bumrah, right? Because Jadeja is someone who at one point was honestly rivaling Ashwin for being the best spinner in the world. I mean, I've heard a number of batters, including Steve Smith, Faf du Plessis, Johnny Bairstow, say that one of the toughest challenges they faced was facing Jadeja in India. But it seems like for the last couple of years, he hasn't looked as threatening. He's been outbowled even by other left-arm spinners. If you want to talk about the New Zealand series or by Simon Harmer here, is there a bit of decline that you see? Because it's not very visible, to be honest, while watching. Is it what KK is talking about, just bowling on too many, rank turners where he's lost a part of his game? Do you see a bit of decline in Jadeja? The first thing I wanted to ask you. And the second is on Bumrah. I mean, there's a lot of expectations from Bumrah. He took a fifer in the first test, first day. He bowled well on the first day here. But is there now, I mean, can India look to him as being their spearhead when it seems like beyond the point in a test match, he doesn't look as threatening, or is that a theory that you don't agree with? So I wanted to focus on these two bowlers in particular because they're two of India's experienced bowlers who are under the scanner after this test in particular.
I mean, Jadeja, Sid, go on,
Okay, Jadeja, I think it is clear, and Jadeja himself has also mentioned that when he bowled with Ashwin, it created a dynamic that, like, they complemented each other really well, and that has kind of taken away from him not having Ashwin, not just in terms of the kind of pressure that is being created at the other end, but in terms of bouncing ideas, thoughts. They have lost like a leader, almost kind of a leader in Ashwin, and they did really form a very good tag team, which Washington, I mean, he's improved a lot, and he can be a test bowler on his own right. But right now, he's not that. He's maybe as good as, say, some of the other off spinners that might have visited India, maybe Todd Murphy or somebody. Is not yet that Ashwin level bowler. And to the point that when somebody like Smith says that Jadeja, or Johnny Bairstow says that Jadeja is the most difficult bowler, it also has something to do with the kind of pitches they played on. Smith says every time that Smith has come to India, he's played on square turners.
Not so much
Except for
17. Not
except
the
for Ranchi and Dharamshala. Bangalore and
Yeah.
Pune were square turners. Now on the next tour, all test matches turners except for Ahmedabad. So
Yeah.
that kind of
played him. 2013 as well. He
yes.
played him, I think.
That time neither Jadeja nor Smith were.
Jadeja got a lot of wickets in this. Yeah.
I think
Smith
at
got a
that time
92
Jadeja.
in Mohali or something. I think it was one of
Okay.
his. Yeah.
The most interesting thing about that series is that Jadeja was brought in to replace a batter, and
Mhm.
Smith was
Yeah.
brought in to replace a bowler.
Yeah.
At that time, their own teams were trying to figure out what these guys are, and so that kind of their opinion might have been a little clouded by the kind of pitches that they played Jadeja on. Uh, Ashwin was a much more versatile bowler than any of the spinners India have in the last 10 years. Which kind of lifted others also with him. And he also, I'm sure, benefited from having Jadeja at the other end. It showed in the Chennai Test match where England batted for 2 days. And after that, India had to go to a square turner, you know. So all these things, because Shabaz Nadeem was not quite the Jadeja at the other end. So they kind of lifted each other, which has played a role in Jadeja's decline, or in numbers or in his effectiveness. There's, he's also slightly, because he's so good, with everything he does. He doesn't have that kind of. Uh, he doesn't feel that constant need to keep tinkering, keep trying to add that 1%er, 5%er to his game, whether it be by ways of changes of speed or angles. Uh, we know for a fact that he's been asked to get slower, but he doesn't feel confident bowling. He doesn't feel that comfortable bowling slower. Here also there was one ball in this match where he, like, almost as a it was just like a mock delivery that he bowled way slower than he ever bowls, and then it turned and bounced and beat Mulder, and he also smiled at himself, and I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe I should do it, maybe whatever, or I can also do it, but I have good reasons to not do this. Uh, if you remember, it's the same thing that we used to say about other spinners, Chahal, Kuldeep, all of them. The reason to keep them out was their speed in the air. And now we are beating Jadeja for his speed in the air being quicker than the South African ones, because in this series, the slower speeds worked more. But on a larger point, there's one small worry that I have is that as we talk about the last time India was outplayed so comprehensively in a test match or in a test series was that England series in 12-13, where Swan and Montepanesar and Anderson completely outbowled their counterparts in the Indian lineup. What happened after that was perhaps Ashwin has kind of these intangibles, this insatiable urge to keep improving, competing, and he just, there was perhaps India was just lucky that they got these kind of 3-4 highly competitive guys, Kohli, Ashwin, uh, Shami, who came around at that same time, and they kind of lifted India to such heights. Maybe that is not replicable. Maybe it might not be possible now. So that is what you want to see, whether these spin bowlers now that they have had that kind of England kind of series, how will they respond? What are they looking at? All those things. For Kuldeep Yadav, before I go to Bumrah, I just wanted to make one point about Kuldeep Yadav. When we kept saying that he should play in England, South Africa, Australia, there is a completely different bowler, because there he's coming in after the pressure has been created by seamers. Whereas here he's having to almost lead the attack. Because he's the guy expected to do the work on day one when there's nothing in the pitch, which he kind of did on day one here. But like the challenge for Kuldeep is much bigger in India than overseas, because here he has to lead the attack. So that also will kind of reveal itself how he is going to do in the next big series against Australia, which is in February 2027. Now Bumrah, I don't know, yeah. Bumrah, why people still keep questioning Bumrah? He got you 5 wickets on a square turner on day one. And he looked like whenever he bowled, even in this test, even if he was not getting wickets, scoring seemed very difficult of him. He was always on the target, always. I mean, people get better. Some of his novelties people have kind of got used to, and they will get better. And it has not happened overnight. Slowly, slowly it happens. And then when we lose one series, we think, oh, because Bumrah cannot forever be that guy who will average 19.
I just feel that times like I can't remember Bumrah too often, doing what Jansen did, or just like it feels like sometimes India are more reliant on Siraj. Maybe because of his body, he can do it. But like to come in a situation where there's a big partnership and you want someone to get through a spell of 5-6 overs and somehow break that partnership, it actually feels like India are more reliant on Siraj to do that. Maybe it's just the limitations of Bumrah's body, and maybe it's just his personality where he doesn't show that fight on the field. Maybe he has it in him. Obviously, none of us can tell from the outside, but I think that's maybe some of the impressions people have of Bumrah, that he's a little content in what he does and he doesn't have that drive to come out, which of course none of us can really prove. But I guess it also doesn't help when the captain is giving him only 2-3 over spells and you're not getting him to see him come. And this time, like on day 2 morning, my feeling was, why don't Bumrah and Siraj just try to bounce these guys out? They didn't. They tried a few bouncers here and there, but they didn't do what Jansen did, which is just bowl short and try and bounce Muthuswamy out. They were just bowling on their usual lengths to him.
See, but like Jansen can do what he does because he's Jansen. He's 6'8".
6'8".
He gets that disconcerting bounce. This was not a pitch with like uneven bounce necessarily. It had bounce. It was not uneven. So, which Washington Sundar clarified in his press conference, because I was thinking, he's getting some balls to kick. But yeah, he didn't get anything to like keep low or anything. It was just awkward bounce from not a genuinely like bouncer length. It's very hard to face. It's very, very awkward to face. Bumrah and Siraj are like, neither of them is even 6 feet tall, if I'm not wrong, right? So maybe on a lower bounce pitch, if they get sort of skiddy bouncers going, that could be like awkward to face. On a pitch like this, it's not a ploy that either of them is going to seriously consider using for any length of time. Maybe just bowl a surprise bouncer every now and then, which they were doing, I think. And on day 2, I thought Bumrah and Siraj, especially when Jansen was batting, like it felt at times like India were kind of over bowling them. By the end, they both ended up with, I don't know how many overs they had bowled, 30 odd overs, right? 30 plus, which is a lot, especially like it was warmer than Calcutta. It was like humid, and over 2 days, that's a lot of workload to get through.
Which I consider as a failure of Indian spinners. That
Yeah.
fast bowlers had to bowl 35 overs.
Yeah, correct. And on the body language thing, I mean, this is the same guy who, when he gets wickets and barely celebrates, you're like, oh, look at him, this is what makes him special, because like, for him, it's not whatever. Like, you can look at it that way as well, right? And then suddenly he can't change into a different person. And it would be fake if he did that. And we would all be like cringing at it if he tried to do that.
Let's not get into
And-
discussions on whether whose aggression is fake and whose is real. I hope we are well past it.
Yeah, but also, yeah, and like we should not be doing body language analysis here. And Siraj was trying to G up the crowd and stuff, but all of that only has so much effect, if any. And when Kohli was doing that, when India were on top, it's great. But there were matches where India was struggling, India were looking flat on the field. He was still doing that because Kohli does that. Crowds were still, getting behind the team. But sometimes nothing helps. None of that helps because, the other team is playing really well and India are struggling to break a partnership. And that's happened with Kohli in the side, with Ashwin in the side, with like everybody in the side, and India have still had bad days on the field. It will happen.
So let's talk about the larger picture, because I'll defend a few of my positions. First of all, I'll defend why I call these losses humiliating, and also why I feel like a lot of people are right in wanting more from India, and it's not necessarily a criticism of this.
from India.
No, I'm saying it's not necessarily a criticism of this side or of Gautam Gambhir specifically. But I think where a lot of the frustration comes from, and this is why I did call it a humiliation, is because, let's be honest, India is a third world country, but yet there is one field in which we are the clear financial and commercial powerhouse in the world. So my point is that a lot of Indian ego is now Yeah, so the reality is that for a lot of Indians, cricket is a matter of pride and ego, and losing 0-5 at home is something which is not considered acceptable. When you talk about a transition phase, again, for some teams, maybe you can say transition is fine, but when you have a population of more than 1 billion, where cricket is such a viable career now because of tournaments like the IPL, I think there is a valid question to say, why should India have to have a transition phase? Why aren't there enough players waiting in the wings to just come into the team? You've got, I mean, by far the largest talent pool in the world in terms of pure numbers. I mean, we're losing to teams like New Zealand that, I mean, their population can't even rival some of our larger cities. There are more people playing cricket on one block in India than there are in New Zealand as a country. So this is where the frustration is. This is not really acceptable for India to say that this is a transition period, and then it is a little disconcerting. And again, when I talk about the hunger for Test cricket, maybe it's not for the players. The players, I'm sure, when they're going onto the field, want to win every single Test match. But the board and the cricketing structure has gone more towards white ball cricket. There are more opportunities in white ball cricket today. A young kid can grow up thinking even if he makes it to KPL or Mumbai T20 League, they can earn a good living. They cannot earn a good living playing red ball cricket at club level, probably not even at state level, depending on which state you're from. So this is where the structure ultimately does incentivize white ball cricket. And so maybe, and it especially doesn't help when you have a coach who, when he's asked about whether he's the right person for the red ball team, says, I won the Asia Cup and the Champions Trophy, which are not red ball tournaments. So this is where the frustration is that, okay, maybe we just have to accept that Test cricket is not that important to Indian cricket anymore. And it's not the players' fault. They might want to play Test cricket, but the structure is such that they are not as incentivized to do it.
So I will, again, these two things I just keep saying again and again and again, but they're worth saying again and again and again, because India might be 1.4 billion or how many of billion. I think India's coach knows it better because he plays for every one of them. He must have the updated numbers, but I want to see the kind of nutrition as a child. New Zealand, which is such a small country, the most desperate people make, generally the rule is the most desperate people make it to the top in cricket because there's so much competition. So what kind of nutrition as a child has a New Zealander had compared to an Indian kid who's making it to the top? And Indians, you won't believe it, top level, you are still fighting. Some of the players, you have to still correct the nutritional deficiencies that they had as kids. So there might be way more people playing cricket in India. There is a big disadvantage of, as I very flippantly neglected, we are still a poor country. And it kind of shows in the most desperate kids who make it because it's a career, it's a way out of poverty, way out. It's the only legal upward mobility that we have in India. So there we are not producing Kyle Jamisons or Marco Janssens or big healthy guys who are coming, who have never had any nutritional issues, who come and who can last matches, series. So those challenges we have to face right at the top level. Now, having said that, I totally agree with you that the board, it is the richest board, and whereas when the demand for cricketers has increased at least tenfold from the time IPL started. Earlier, you had only about 20 elite cricketers in the country. Now the demand has increased so much. You cannot be relying on the same methods that you have had from 1960 or whenever they were set to identify and bring the talent. You do not have that approach towards excellence. I do not see. Yes, you've made a center of excellence, but it is again serving the top 50 cricketers of the country. You are not identifying 13, 14. You don't know what are the attributes that you need to look for in 12, 13. What not the cricketing attributes, the physical attributes that you need to look for in 12, 13, 14-year-olds, which will translate into fast bowlers who can have long careers. You have done no study. You have done no research. You do not go out. You do not reach. You do not open the you don't cast the net as wide as you can in this country to find talent, to look at what is stopping you've got so much money. What is stopping you from having a project? Do not advertise it. Do not look for credit. Just quietly do your research, do your everything, and just have a project that is aiming at somebody who identifying a group of 30 kids who in 10 years will be at the top, and giving them the best nutrition, best care, best mental conditioning, best kind of practice, best matches. What is stopping you from doing that? You have not tried a single alternative way to bring up talent in this country. You're still leaving it to those state associations who are only going to look after themselves, who are only interested in making sure they win the elections and they get the quota, the money that they get from BCCI. So you have not innovated at all, whereas the demand for cricketers has gone up 10 times. And what you do is you actually using your monopoly to prevent anyone else from doing that also. Whereas when you say that if these IPL teams cannot pluck somebody from, say, a tribal kid from Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh and train them for 5 years and bring them into their side. No, you cannot do that because you have to have played first class cricket. So you cannot even let neither you're doing something nor are you letting someone else subvert that system to get much more, to condition the talent much more by the time they are ready for international cricket. I kind of don't want to take press conferences seriously because sometimes people say things that they don't want to because you are in the spotlight sometimes. But if Gautam Gambhir means it, it's a very disturbing thing to say. That you don't want highly talented and flamboyant players in Test cricket. You want limited skill.
Yeah.
So I ended up with saying they tend to make good Test cricketers, which is completely not true. There is no substitute for skill and talent and fitness.
Yeah.
And you want to encourage as many flamboyant players to come play Test cricket instead of, discouraging them and saying limited players with great character, which is kind of saying.
I feel like the two are not mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
You can have amazing character and amazing talent.
You're headed towards that thing that happened with West Indies where, the best talent was going to T20 and Test cricket was left for people who would not make it into T20. Like Keg Brathwaite is a great example. He was tough as nuts, but he was a very limited player. So you don't want that to happen. You want to incentivize doing well in first class cricket, and a definite increase should be made in first class cricket fees. I'm totally with Justin. Even though first class cricketers are making more than an average professional in India today, the Indian cricketers are generally grossly underpaid compared to.
And I say this because I know like a lot of young cricketers in Mumbai, and for them, their dream now is just to make the Mumbai T20 league. It's not even Ranji or IPL, because even playing Mumbai T20 league, they can earn a good living. And that is a very achievable goal for them, because that's like not even at IPL level. It's a local state league, but you're getting paid more there than you would get paid if you pursued red ball cricket. Getting into the Mumbai Ranji Trophy side for them is something where their coaches themselves will tell the kids that that's very hard. You get into an MPL team or Mumbai T20 league or whatever, you will make good money. And so these guys at the ages of 14, 15, like my nephew, for example, is practicing range hitting because you're not going to, they're not focusing so much on defense and leaving the ball, or they're building strength. And you're right that this overall, I mean, I don't want to get too wide here, but the fact is that India spends like 0.1% of their budget on sports. And you see it in other sports. I mean, we're talking about Indian cricket. Indian football team is ranked 142nd in the world. It's bizarre. We couldn't even make the Asian qualifiers for a 64-team World Cup. Forget about getting close to the World Cup. You see it in Olympic sport where, you have one odd guy like a Neeraj Chopra, a complete outlier, can win you a medal and we celebrate him. But there's absolutely no structure. I see it as a father now. Like, there's no structure for sport in this country. Schools don't have facilities. You are relying on them paying big fees to try and send your kid to private coaching, which only one small percentage of the population can afford. And so in general, you're not building sport as a culture. And in terms of nutrition and everything, if you start getting kids from the age of 10, 11, even if they say start off in another sport, like which happens so much in the West, right? In South Africa or in Australia, you have so many guys start off in another sport and come to cricket, but that's because they're at least building their athleticism from the time they're 10 years old, which doesn't happen here. So, I mean, we should keep all of that in perspective when we go hard at this Indian team, because ultimately they are, as you rightly said, we are still a poor country and we're still dealing with a lot of these hurdles when it comes to building a strong test side, which we should keep in mind. Okay, we're 1 hour 26 minutes into this podcast now. So we need to, but before we go talk about how good South Africa was in the series, I won't say much. I'll just let you guys take it away. KK, you can start and just talk about like how exceptional this was as a performance by them over 210.
I mean, just Harmer, like, I think you take Harmer away and you put a regular above average, put Todd Murphy there. Entire series changes. Entire series in every way changes. We would not be sitting here and having this conversation about all the ills affecting Indian sport at large. There's no way that could have happened. And all of that is because of one man, Simon Harmer, right? Like, I mean, I can stick my neck out and say he's the best visiting spinner I have seen. Like, come to India and like bowl. Better than Nathan Lyon, who's come multiple times, and he had an incredible tour in 2023. He bowled brilliantly. He's better than that. Better than Graham Swan in 2012-13. So like I mean, just he's tall, wears sunglasses, comfortable taking the new ball, and he comes on and bowls, and like at some point you're like, am I watching Ashwin bowl? Right? And not just any Ashwin, but like Ashwin at his peak where he could do whatever he wanted. And of course, he doesn't have like a carom ball or anything like that, but the way he can like vary his pace, the way he can like, there's one LBW appeal late on day 4 against, I think, Sai Sudarshan, where bat just didn't come down in time because with no change in action whatsoever, boom, like a incredibly like 93 kph or something like that, having bowled a lot of 77, 78 kph with the same sort of action. Like, this was a bowler at such a peak that you don't get to see it often, that you have to savor it while you're watching it. And that he's 36. Like, are we ever going to see him bowl in India again? I hope we do, because it was just so good to watch, so magnificent. Like, his bowling, especially in Guwahati on that pitch, where he just, no other spinner looked like they could get wickets at say a 60 strike rate there. He was like looking like he's gonna get a wicket every like 4th over. That's incredible bowling. And so, I mean, like Simon Harmer, it's one of the great away tours by anyone to any country, I would say. I mean, it's a pity that it was just 2 test matches. Um, 10
Bumrah in
Rauka
Australia
series.
levels.
Sorry?
It was Bumrah in Australia levels.
It was exactly that, yeah. And it's a pity it was just 2 tests. And Jansen, we've always known he's got the tools to be like an all-time great, like one of the great all-rounders if he, puts together like a test career where he achieves something close to his potential. And we saw like how high that ceiling can be, both with the bat and the ball in this test match. And, so just to witness those 2 performances was like incredible. And, they came superbly prepared. They had a great tour of Pakistan as well. And they improved as they went along, right? Lost the first test there. Then they won 3 on the bounce in Pakistan and India, which is like so stunning achievement for a team from South Africa. They have had like really good teams in the past which had great away records, like under Graham Smith and all. And this is one of the great moments in South African cricket history for sure. And these 2 players, especially, but even their batting, I thought like right through all of their batters in various ways, they didn't get a lot of big scores other than Senur and Muthuswamy scoring that century and Jansen making 90 odd. But they all looked real. I mean, even in Calcutta, a lot of them looked like they had very interesting plans. And like, I thought one guy I wanted to mention is Tony DeZorzi, who did he even score a 50 in this series? I'm not sure. But every time he came out to bat, he looked so busy. He was making this, moving the scoreboard along. And on that fourth day also, just before he came in, where Stubbs seemed like he was getting stuck, and I forget who he was batting with. Bauma. Washington had just got him out. There was a tiniest window for India to maybe be like, okay, maybe we can bowl them out for 150 and miraculously win this game somehow. He came in and that chance was gone. So I thought he batted really well without getting the so much reward for it. And like that, like right through Bavuma's innings in Calcutta. And so, yeah, it was it was definitely apart from England in 2012-13, the best visiting team performance that I have seen in India for sure. I think it was better than New Zealand's performance last year because I think they outskilled India. Where in the New Zealand series you could argue that India's call after winning the toss in Bangalore, all these things, a lot of luck went in New Zealand's favor. Luck did go South Africa's way also with the tosses and with Gill getting injured and India being down to 10 men. But I think they outskilled India on this tour, and that's like a magnificent achievement.
Yeah, this was as good as 2004 Australia visit to India
Mhm.
when they beat. Well, I mean, only that last test on a square turner was the one that they lost. Otherwise, they completely outskilled India, but in different conditions. In these conditions, they kind of outspun India, and their fast bowler did well on pitches that were not helping any other fast bowler. So it's really they did it with a batting lineup where nobody averages even 40 in Test cricket, which kind of shows that batting, if your bowlers can keep giving you 20 wickets, batting really does not have that big a say. I mean, it has a say, but there's only so much batting can do if the bowling is really good. But yeah, you've covered everything about their Simon Harmer and Marco Janssen. I think, as you said about Harmer having one of the great away series, I think Janssen had the great away match in Guwahati. I don't know what Botham must have done in that match. It's comparable to the Jubilee Test where Botham scored 100 into 13 wickets. And Jansen's, just one thing to add is Jansen's early strikes kind of created a big impact on the series. That chase, 100, what was it, 130? We knew it was going to be a challenging chase. We knew it was always going to be a challenging chase, but if he doesn't get those 2 quick wickets with the new ball, who knows? I mean, if there's one partnership or Jaiswal gets going, you never know. So those early wickets did help Simon Harmer a lot.
And the only phase of this whole series where an Indian batter looked like they could get on top of Harmer was when Jaiswal made that 50 and he was using the slog sweep. He's the one batter who looked like he had both a plan and a way of executing it to put the pressure back on Harmer. And that never happened in Calcutta because he didn't get out of the first over, basically. He didn't face any spin in that match. And in the second innings in Guwahati as well. So,
I think that's where that's where this 2 balls spun big and India kind of started playing shots, thinking, hey, this pitch is going. I think that's where slightly lack of experience came into play, where they could have given it a session and seen whether it's consistent spin or it's just the moisture in the morning.
Yes. And just on how in South Africa, we've talked a lot about India's lack of experience. The coach has pointed out that this is a batting order in transition. Well, 4 of South Africa's top 7 had also played 17 or fewer tests. So they are also doing this with quite an inexperienced side themselves, which is what makes it even more remarkable. And so we leave our listeners with that, how good South Africa were. Unfortunately, we had to get to that right at the end after discussing everything about India. But, well, this is an Indian-centric podcast, but I hope we did some justice to how well South Africa played in the series. I would have asked about the way forward for India in Test cricket, but India don't play Test cricket for quite a while. So the next time you see us, perhaps we'll be discussing red ball cricket if we decide to review some Ranji Trophy round, but we'll see everybody else next time, where hopefully we won't be discussing such large structural problems with India in general. Hopefully it will be more cricket-centric, but we'll see you all next time. Thank you for listening.
TV umpire to director, we have a review. Can you rock and roll it for me, please?